Hello everyone, welcome back. It's Empyrion Galactic Survival episode 81. I'm Igneous, and today, the Manta, we're breaking new ground, covering new territory, and I say that figuratively. We're not touching the ground, we're working on the ship. But today we're working in an area that we just haven't really touched before, and that is the front section of the ship between the upper and lower hulls, and getting the details into place. One of the possible setups that I have in mind for this frontal section, and if I decide later on that I don't like it, I have an alternative that we'll have an opportunity to take a look at, but we'll save that for when I've made that determination. For now, I'm basically getting ready to do what it is that I want to do, and I have to, first of all, I wanted to beef up this central area just because the ship itself is starting to take on a very beefy kind of feel. It's like a big, heavy, wide. It's not necessarily tall. It's just it's like a bulldog. It's just a big beefy slab of blocks that has a little bit of detail to it, and I like it the way it's coming together so far. But what it means is for the key details, the structural details, like that middle section, I can't really leave it narrow and flimsy looking. It just wouldn't fit with the rest of the design. So I made that a little bit wider, bent it back a little bit towards the inside so that it looks like it can stand on its own. It looks like it was designed to be there. And now we're looking at the profile and the lower hull and sort of expanding it out a little bit. I was talking in the last episode about how I wanted to leave certain things flat, vertical, straight up and down, just because that was a look that I had in mind that wasn't necessarily easy to execute in other areas of the ship. But you can see here, we've actually got two rows of blocks that are vertical. And that to me is a little bit too much. It's kind of the obvious opposite problem, is we've got too much straight up and down. So I'm taking a little bit of time now to modify it a little bit, flare it out a little bit. We'll retain that one row of blocks that's straight up and down, and then we'll do what we can with the remainder so that we can add that little bit of extra interest. Try it. Anyways, that's the least we can do. Now, one of the things that crossed my mind, because again, this still has to be a functional ship in order for me to be happy with it, is the reverse thrusters and where to put those. And one of the things that I thought might be an idea was to put them in this frontal area so that you can see them when you're looking at the front of the ship. They're in a spot where it'd be very, very easy to place them without having to worry about how we're going to put them in place. And it would also potentially, depending on what was going on with the ship, give us the opportunity to put a lot more thrusters, reverse thrusters in place than we would normally be able to do if we were putting them elsewhere on the ship. Now, I'm not completely decided that that's what we're going to do. I kind of have some other ideas as well when it comes to the placement of the reverse thrusters, because I've had it in the past with hover vessels in particular, where we put so many thrusters on for forward propulsion that when it comes time to slowing down the ship or stopping the ship and then reversing, it's almost easier to just spin the ship 180 degrees and jam forward and basically come to a stop that way, using your forward thrusters as reverse thrusters by spinning the ship around. We've got so many forward thrusters on this ship that may end up being the best option in terms of performance, but we still want at least a token amount of reverse thrusters in place so that if we're sitting still, we can reverse. We don't have to rotate the ship a whole 180 degrees in order to move it the opposite direction. So we do need a reverse, but how effective that reverse needs to be is kind of up in the air. And because of that, where I end up putting the thrusters will also be kind of decided in the future, largely on whim. To be completely honest, we still have to get the lateral thrusters on, the ones that go side to side. Those are very important, just for the sake of maneuverability. That's one where, if I had to decide, if I had only a limited number of thrusters to spend for all of the remainder of the ship's maneuverability, most of them would go on the lateral thrusters as opposed to putting them in the reverse thrusters, regardless of what option we chose for how we were going to reverse. just because the maneuverability is kind of key. When you're moving around, especially when you're assaulting points of interest, potentially moving in for position to start shooting the turrets and things of that nature, there are times when you just start taking fire, and the easiest way to avoid the fire is to strafe one way or the other and get out of the way. That's just the nature of the beast. So lateral thrusters are pretty important. And again, we've left ourselves with plenty of room to decide exactly where we want to put them, where they'll look like they make sense, and of course they will be effective. So that's another thing that I was sort of keeping in mind as we were moving forward with this, is where are we going to put the lateral thrusters and how is that going to look? You can see now we've done the flaring of the lower hull, and primarily, again, it's not perfect, it's not seamless, it's not 100% fluid, but it is using the blocks that we have to create the shapes that are available to us. And now we're finally, hooray, almost getting ready to show off the detail, the key elements of this build in the front section. We've got that narrow section in the middle. We talked about that, how we made it wider. Now I want to kind of duplicate that on the sides, and between that middle section there that you can see now, it's just barely on the right side of the screen, and the area that we're working in now, if we get them pretty close in terms of appearance, if not identical to one another, it's going to make it a lot easier for us to kind of finish off the other vertical details that I want to do in the front. Now, you've seen me do sort of like grills before, using the wall blocks, those little narrow blocks, to make that sort of grill appearance. It's the only way I can think of to describe it. And that's kind of like what we're going to end up doing here with vertical grills, kind of spaced apart far enough that you still get this sense of grandeur. It still looks big and beefy without being so busy, because we put them a block apart that it's too much. Hopefully, that's the idea. And you can see here, all we have to do is duplicate the profile of that little thing that we put in the center there. And that's, I mean, it's literally that simple to put it together. Because we spent that little bit of extra time at the beginning doing the profiles and kind of figuring out an idea in our head of what this front section would look like, we can now put it together fairly quickly and easily, because we have a pretty good understanding of what we need to do and how it's going to come together. The one thing that we have to be a little bit careful about is when we get around to the texturing and the painting. What I've done in the past with these kinds of things is I use the primer texture. I call it that because it's basically like a flat texture that you can use to create when you paint it. It's a flat sort of surface. It doesn't have any shine to it. And then I paint the insides black after I put that primer texture, so that it's kind of like this shadowy area. You don't really feel like you can ever see what's going on back there, because it's this flat black kind of surface. The thing with that is trying to figure out where to have that transition between the hull color and the flat black surfaces to make it look like it's just fading to blackness in the back. If we don't, ironically, if we don't set up these guys up front properly, it becomes kind of tricky to make it work with that black idea later on when we get to that point. So I don't want to worry too much about it. It's one of those things where if we start thinking too far ahead, we just kind of stall and it stops being fun because nothing is happening and there's really no reason for it to not be happening. But you can see there, that's the basic profile that we're looking at. And now, for the remainder of this video, you get to watch the final details going into place. We're going to kind of close it off, you'll see, from the interior, because obviously we can't leave the front of the ship open like that. The next episode is going to be focused on finishing off the front end of the air intake vents. We haven't done that yet. We still have to completely build that on and finish it. We're not reworking the intake vents at all. And we'll get that done. And then it'll only be 1 or 2 episodes away before you see this guy painted and ready to go. So if you want to be notified about the next video, you can always subscribe to my channel. You can follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.